attitude. Well,
a battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, libraries are under attack. We talk to folks who are fighting back. Adderholt is trying to kill coal miners. We talk to the Ironworkers about their apprenticeship program. And Greece is trying to make its workers work more. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week and we might respond on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to our donation portal tvlr.fm/donate. You can also buy our logo caps at our merch store, tvlr.fm/store, or become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. If you're a member of a union, then your local can sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who believe that Alabama's labor movement and the working class deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
And with that, we're going to jump right into last week in Southern labor. Here is what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from June 28th to July the 5th in new union campaigns. 7 workers at Hiller LLC in Bowling Green, Kentucky filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA Local 502. 60 workers at Sibelco, North America in Spruce Pine, North Carolina filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Mine Workers of America, UMWA. 31 workers at the Sun Sentinel in Deerfield Beach, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the News Guild, CWA. 19 workers at Starbucks in Northfield, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 16 workers at Starbucks in Alpharetta, Georgia, and 15 more at a location in Roswell, Georgia. 50 workers at Missouri Smelting Technology in Troy, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Auto Workers, UAW. 27 workers at Consolidated Waste Service in Trujillo Alto, Puerto Rico, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Central General de Trabajadores, as did 20 more workers at Consolidated Waste Services in Humalco, Puerto Rico. 38 workers at AGL Services Company in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 1997. 2 workers at Prime Communications in Montgomery, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. Workers at the Sun Sentinel announced that they are unionizing with the News Guild, CWA, and are demanding voluntary recognition. In election results, a petition to add one worker to a Teamsters Local 657 union bargaining unit at UPS in Pharr, Texas was withdrawn. 15 workers at Starbucks in Pinecrest, Florida voted in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 3 workers at Florida Public Utilities Company in Winter Haven, Florida voted in favor of unionization with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 1625, but 10 workers at another location of the Florida Public Utilities Company in Winter Haven voted against unionization. 9 workers at BMC St. Charles in O'Fallon, Missouri voted 8-1 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 682. 2 workers at Prime Communications in Opelika, Alabama voted in favor of unionization with CWA Local 3908. 70 security guards at Universal Protection Service in Tampa, Florida voted 14-9 in favor of unionization with the Security Police and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA. 46 workers at Innovative Solutions Unlimited in Aiken, South Carolina voted 24-11 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 509. 23 security guards at Paragon Systems in Washington, D.C. voted to switch unions from the Protective Security Officer Members of America to the SPFPA. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, the ACLU, which has had charges brought against it at the NLRB by the Workers' Union, compared criticisms of its management by workers to the lynching of Emmett Till. In Strikes and Bargaining Updates, Sarah Jaffe wrote for In These Times about the efforts of New Orleans workers to establish a Workers' Bill of Rights in the city. Workers at Del Bar in Atlanta with the Union of Southern Service Workers, USSW, protested in front of the restaurant to demand higher pay and better working conditions. City workers at Gainesville, Florida, unionized with the CWA, are scrambling to maintain their 60% threshold so that they are not dissolved by the state. UAW Local 862 in Louisville, Kentucky announced that it had reached an agreement on the skilled trades local addendum to the master contract at the Ford, Kentucky truck plant. Nurses in Central Florida, represented by National Nurses United, rallied for safe nurse-patient ratios. In political and legislative updates, the Biden administration unveiled a proposal to protect workers from extreme heat, which, if finalized, would mandate that employers undergo extreme heat safety training, create and regularly update emergency heat response plans, and provide workers with shade and water. The Supreme Court refused to hear a case which challenged the constitutionality of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to the chagrin of billionaire friend-having Clarence Thomas, who thinks that the agency is unconstitutional. The UMWA is slamming Republicans for trying to kill a rule that would protect coal miners from black lung. Allied Universal, a security firm contracted by Orange County Corrections for a price of $27 million, has failed to meet minimum contractual staffing requirements multiple times. Recent reporting from ProPublica highlights how rural Republicans are fighting against voucher privatization schemes in their schools. Renters need to earn at least $31 an hour to afford living in Orlando, Florida, according to a new study. And that is it for our quick roundup. Didn't have a whole lot of time to prep that segment this week, so if we missed anything, and we likely did, send us your updates at tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back talking to Dr. Marisa Allison about the fight in Alabama's libraries. Stay tuned. Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We're going to have some more room in the program for calls today, so go ahead and get in if you think that, if you want to ask us a question, participate in the discussion on any of the topics, etc., feel free to do that. 844-899-8857. Before we get to our first guest, I had this quick story. We've been trying to include some quick international stories in the program more recently, and this one out of Greece is absolutely insane. You'll know that across the world, particularly in Western Europe, and some nascent goings on in America, there's a push for a shorter work week, 4 days a week for the same amount of pay. There's a push for that all over the world. Some some industries in some countries have already been able to win a 4-day work week, and through various means, whether that be just straight up eliminating a 5th day of work, or whether that's, eliminating, some of them have like 32 or 35-hour work weeks, right? And you add on 3 hours on the other 4 days, but you still have, that 5th day off. Some different mechanisms there, but, less than 40 hours of work for 40 hours of pay has been kind of the trend. That's where people are trying to go to. Well, Greece is going in exactly the opposite direction last week, implementing a 6-day work week in some industries. Now, to be fair, the implementation of the 6-day work week is voluntary, so the government is allowing municipalities and companies in Greece to implement a 6-day work week, and it does seem, and I'm not super clear on this, what some reporting says that if workers do have to work a 6th day, they will be rewarded with a 40% pay increase in their daily wage. So does that mean that their total compensation increases by 40% for a 6th day of work, or does that mean that they will get 1.4 times their hourly wage on the 6th day of work, right? I'm not super clear on that. But not great. Not great as people are trying to move kind of in the opposite direction. Greece is moving towards more, more drudgery and more toiling and more labor for working people. And it's, it's terrible. One of the reasons cited for implementing a longer work week is their lagging labor productivity, which are ostensibly from two things. One is a declining population, which is like, okay, if you've got a declining population, but you still need to have certain productivity goals, it's not totally illogical that you would want to increase the working week. Another way to fix that you have a declining population, would be to increase immigration, and then you're able to give immigrants a better life while not making the native workers' lives worse, right? So immigration is a much easier response to that if the concern is just declining population. Another reason stated for the lagging productivity rate is high unemployment, which is like... That's increasing the work week is exactly the opposite thing of what you would want to do if you want to attack the unemployment rate by fooling with the length of the work week, right? I mean, back 100 years ago in the 1930s during the Great Depression, America did consider very seriously a 4-day work week. And why was that? Because we had a high unemployment rate, and if you have everybody working less, if I take my productive hours from 5 days a week to 4 days a week, and we're not able to make up for that in efficiency during those 4 days, well, that 5th day of work still needs to get done, and you have a whole lot of people doing that. Well, there you go. You got a whole other job that you can hire somebody else. You got several whole other jobs that you can hire somebody else, and that's actually how you would attack the high unemployment rate, by fiddling with the work week. You would decrease it if you would want to attack the high unemployment rate. So just totally, kind of nonsensical stuff coming from the Greece elite. They're increasing the working week to 6 days a week, 48 hours a week. Very, very bad. Very bad. Greece trade unions are obviously protesting this, particularly some of the public workers were protesting and rallying against this. So hopefully they will be successful in getting this overturned swiftly and before it is voluntarily implemented by wide swaths of the private sector and public sector in Greece. With that out of the way, we are going to bring on our first guest today. Dr. Marisa Allison is a public sociologist and community organizer in Huntsville. She's a co-founder of the At the Root Collective here in North Alabama, as well as chair of the Labor Committee for the North Alabama chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. She's part of the Save Our Libraries campaign, which is a joint campaign of the North Alabama and Birmingham chapters of the DSA, and is going to be telling us a little bit about what's going on in Alabama libraries and how we can support library workers and the marginalized communities that are being impacted. Dr. Allison, welcome to the program.
Thank y'all. Hey, everyone. Love your show. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. And I wanted to just start with, could you give us some background on these attacks on the libraries? You know, how did this really kick off and when did it kick off?
Yeah, so here in Alabama, it started almost a year ago now, but this has been happening for the past 2 or 3 years across the United States, that we've seen, just an uptick of book challenges, book banning, censorship coming into libraries. This past year, there were more than 15 states that introduced bills to, impose penalties, et cetera, on libraries and librarians. And it's just really, really kicked up. But here in Alabama, it's been in the last year, and we don't see that stopping anytime soon.
So how did it, I'm curious, is it the book banning? Is that where this is really like starting? Is that where you see it first pop up in a community, like citizens start showing up at the library wanting to ban certain books? Just tell us a little bit more about like how this has been playing out in different communities across the state of Alabama.
Well, it seems like over the past few years, it has been that way, that folks are coming into different libraries, making book challenges, but it's also happening in the K-12 sector as well, in education. But here in Alabama, we had a small vocal minority that came out of a group called Clean Up Alabama, started in Prattville, and really were pushing back against certain materials in the libraries. This is largely a pushback against LGBTQ materials that are in the children's and young adult sections, although they've sort of disguised it as trying to push back against what they call sexually explicit materials. But what we've seen here is that they've started within the libraries. It's definitely reaching out into the schools as well. And again, this is a small vocal minority connected with Moms for Liberty, Eagle Forum. Across the United States, we see those same organizations involved in all of those places. And they come in with a sort of script of bringing in a book, taken out of context, read a selection of it, get folks up in arms, and then say we need to protect the children. And what ends up happening is that those books are either removed completely from the library or moved into the adult section. They're often misclassified. They're probably in the young adult section. Oftentimes these materials are sex education materials, but they get moved into the adult section, and then legislation starts coming through to punish libraries, impose very harsh penalties to librarians for shelving materials that are considered by this minority as being inappropriate for children. But this goes far beyond materials that have sex mentioned in them, looking at racial justice materials, materials just about families that are different from, the heterosexual norm.
So before we get into some of the connections to the state legislature that you alluded to, that I definitely want to circle back to, but before we get into that, tell us, why is this bad? It may seem obvious to me and it's obvious to you, but for folks listening, why is this like a concern? Why are we worried about this?
Yeah, especially for folks listening to your show, this is a labor issue. This is a working class issue. Our libraries are important places within society for folks to both have shelter from hot summers like we're having right now, but also for kids to have access to, materials, books and such that, potentially their parents or guardians can't afford. And these challenges in general are costing states, libraries, library systems, municipalities a significant amount of money to implement these changes. So, if your listeners heard about what happened in Idaho this past week, is that one of their libraries, which is just a very small log cabin, it's just over 1,000 square feet. Their legislature passed a bill that would allow parents to file a complaint against certain materials that they believe are inappropriate. And then the library would have a short amount of time to move that to the adult section. And if not, if they didn't comply, then the library would owe $250 in damages to parents who lodged that complaint. This particular library in Donnelly, Idaho, wasn't big enough to remove it from where minors could get these materials, so they decided to make it an adults-only library, just so they would be compliant with the state laws, but also wouldn't be breaking federal laws of discrimination and First Amendment violations by moving those materials completely. But here in Alabama, our biggest concern really is that for rural libraries that don't have a whole lot of funding already, that are really tied up, that those libraries, in implementing the changes that are now coming through the state, that they potentially will have to close indefinitely. So it's going to affect workers. It's going to affect the working class who rely on these libraries, especially during the summer.
That's right. That's right. And let's talk about these changes that are coming in Alabama. You mentioned, there's been the legislation. There's also been talks from the governor. Governor Kay Ivey has been involved in this as well. So what are they trying to do here in Alabama from the state level to our library systems?
Yeah, so it's really coming in two different spaces, starting out sort of in the state agency that governs the distribution of state funds to the library. So that's the Alabama Public Library Service. The board of that state agency last fall was sent a letter by Kay Ivey saying that the materials needed to be moved, that library funding would be in jeopardy or should be in jeopardy if libraries wouldn't comply to this list of demands that she had. And those demands, she didn't come up with them herself. They definitely were coming from these extremist organizations that really want to move this material. So in last fall, they proposed a series of changes to the administrative code in Alabama that decides how funding is distributed to libraries. There was a 90-day public comment period. Thousands of activists and Alabamians across the state wrote in to push back against these changes that would basically introduce censorship into the library. But the APLS went ahead and decided to pass those changes. So that was in May. Also in May, they decided to extend those changes even further to not just have policies in place to sort of address what they call these inappropriate materials, but they also are now requesting that come mid-July, that libraries come up with a plan to move all of those materials that they consider sexually explicit and other, this is a quote, other materials that are inappropriate to youth out of the children's and young adult section and into the adult section of the library.
Wow. I have a lot of thoughts there. One thing is, who determines what is inappropriate for the youth? And, of course, the first thing that goes through my mind is that, if you don't like a book, you don't have to check it out. If you are a parent and you're concerned about the books that your children may be exposed to, you could spend time with your children. You could go to the library with them. You could talk to them about the books that they're reading. I mean, these are all perfectly viable options for reasonable human beings. And it's just, it's so wild to see a concerted effort, like you said, that is happening across the country. It's clearly very well organized, or at least somewhat organized and funded, to launch these attacks on libraries, the workers inside the libraries, and the diverse content that's inside these books that a lot of kids are really counting on and need. And it's just, it's really it's disheartening to see the state of Alabama and so many of our politicians catering to what you call it a vocal minority. And I really agree with that. I think the average person is just not concerned that there is, explicit material in the library, and that we should cut funding to libraries or threaten to jail librarians. That's even something that we've heard folks talk about here in Alabama and across the country, that librarians could actually face criminal penalties for the types of books that are checked out. I mean, it's just really, it's extreme. So all that to say, you've been doing a lot of great work fighting back against this. You mentioned the thousands of activists who already have been writing in during that public comment period, but what are some things that folks in the community, folks who work at libraries, but also just, the average citizen who patronizes libraries, what can we do to fight back?
Yeah, I will go back and say that the legislature that they tried to push this year that would have changed the obscenity code and made librarians criminally, and then a companion bill that would have made them civilly responsible for books shelved at the library. That is already on, pre-filed for the 2025 legislative session. So we know that this stuff is coming up. We know right now that these code changes that are being pushed through the Alabama Public Library Service are supposed to go into effect come the 15th of this month. At that point, where libraries are going to have to comply to these demands in order to get this funding. That means that libraries, Ozarkdale is already planning on shutting down for a temporary period just to go through over 3,000 books within their children's and young adult section. It's going to put a lot of stress on the system. And so really everyone across the state really does need to get involved and push back against it. So right now I sent you both, and I guess it'll probably be in the show notes, a link to two things that we have happening within the Save Our Libraries campaign here in Alabama. One is a letter campaign that goes to a joint legislative committee where these code changes are sitting right now. That committee can convene and decide to push these changes back to the APLS, have them do a fiscal investigation to see how this is going to impact local libraries funding-wise to implement these changes. So if folks who are watching this program want to, they can follow the link in, I guess, probably the show notes to sign on to that and try to push the legislature to get involved and push this back to at least, try to keep these changes from being implemented so quickly. It's going to have a huge cost to our libraries. The other thing that we're doing in the Alabama chapters of the Democratic Socialists of America is, we are a group that's very concerned about workers' rights, working conditions, et cetera. That's, one voice that we haven't heard a lot from over the past year are the people who actually work in the libraries and are affected by that. So we've gathered a panel on the 18th of July from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It's going to be a virtual panel of Alabama librarians to give them an idea of what organizing could do for them and what possibilities there are. We have folks from the United Campus Workers here in Alabama, some library workers from other states who have successfully organized, and our very own Adam Keller right here will be on that panel.
Yeah.
So we'd love to have folks sign up for that.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to, discuss organizing in the library context and why we see union power as a really important part of the solution for this crisis that is plaguing the libraries and the attacks that, they're facing from these reactionary forces who are pretty determined to undermine public institutions, right? And that's something that is worth remembering, that this is part of a broader trend that we've experienced really for decades now, is that our public institutions, those that are supposed to be serving all of us, right, from public schools to now public libraries, they have been under attack, they have been undermined, they have been sabotaged. The goal is to, defund them, to criminalize the folks inside them, if at all possible. It's really extreme, and it's, as you mentioned earlier, it's a disservice to working class communities who really depend upon the public libraries. I mean, it's poor and working folks who need this the most, and who depend on it the most, and will be the most impacted. So I really appreciate all the good work you're doing, Marisa. Was there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you want to make sure we talked about this morning?
Nothing that I can think of. No, I'm glad. Thank y'all for covering this. I think everybody just go out, get yourself a library card. Just because these things are happening, we still need to support our libraries. Use the rooms, the meeting spaces, start a book club, start a band book club, and let folks, both the librarians, the workers, and these marginalized communities that are affected know that you're there, and that you're going to push back against this.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah. And appreciate you joining the show, and appreciate all your good work on the Save Our Libraries campaign. Have a good day.
Thank y'all. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. We were going to have Otis, the training coordinator for the Ironworkers Local 477, on the program today, but I don't believe he's in the Zoom. Is that correct? Not in the Zoom? Okay, yeah. He may have had too much fun on the 4th of July. I haven't heard from him. But I know a good bit about the Ironworkers, so I can go ahead and just give you a little bit and direct you to where to go for more, because there is a deadline coming up that I want to make sure that everybody is aware of. So the Ironworkers Union, the Ironworkers Union Local 477 is the local of the Ironworkers in North Alabama, and East Mississippi and Southwest Tennessee. They have a pretty large jurisdiction if you actually take a look at their jurisdiction map on their website. But the Ironworkers is it's a union. It's a trade association that dates back to the 1890s. They represent about 120,000 workers in North America. Members of the union have worked on nearly every major construction project that you can think of, including the Golden Gate Bridge, the Sears Tower, the St. Louis Arch, the oil sands plant expansion in Alberta, the World Trade Center, and Freedom Tower. They represent ironworkers who work on bridges, structural steel, ornamental, architectural, and miscellaneous metals, rebar, and in shops across North America. They build, and they build safely and skillfully, getting the job done right and on time. They provide many benefits and support their members. The benefits include the advantage of working under a collective bargaining agreement that brings bigger paychecks, better health and retirement benefits, more secure jobs, and safe working conditions. You can explore their website and find out more about Ironworkers and how they're building the infrastructure of North America. You can go to ironworkers.org. And, specifically here in North Alabama, I believe, if I'm remembering right, and of course you're going to want to reach out to the phone number that I give you here in a second to verify this, but I believe that first-year apprentices for the Ironworkers Local 477 begin at $18 an hour. $18 an hour, and you almost immediately after becoming an apprentice, I think it's 60 to 90 days or something like that before it kicks in, but almost immediately you get full health coverage, $0 in premiums. You get, you begin paying into your pension. You get a pension, a defined benefit pension, not a defined contribution, defined benefit. You also get the benefits of working under, like I said, a collective bargaining agreement where there are safety standards and enforceable safety standards and things like this. And after a 4-year apprenticeship program, which is the equivalent, really, in instructional time and the amount of material that you have to learn is really the equivalent of a college degree. Their 4-year apprenticeship program. At the end of that, you are you become a journeyman for the Ironworkers, making $30 an hour with, again, maintaining all of those benefits, healthcare, a pension, safe working conditions, and the like. Another one of the benefits of working for the Ironworkers, and this is going to be true of any trade union as opposed to working for a local non-union trade contracting company, is that the trade unions are international operations in the United States and Canada. And so, if for some reason work dries up in your area, you can go and get a job in another jurisdiction. You can go slot right into another local union in another area where the work is, there's always something being built, right? And so you can move anywhere you want in the United States and Canada and slot into a local union and get a job there. That's a really a unique benefit that you only get if you are a part of these international trade unions that you do not get if you're working for some, local podunk, Bill's Bible Contracting, right? I mean, you're not gonna if stuff hits the fan for Bill's Bible Contracting, you just don't have a job, right? And then you kind of got to figure out something else to do. Well, if something goes wrong and the market doesn't have the jobs to support you in the area, then you'll be able to move to somewhere else and get a job there, and that's a really unique opportunity that you have with the building trades unions. So, those are some of the benefits of working for a trade union. It's a really, really great program. Highly recommend it if you do not believe that you are, the college type. It's a great way to the middle class. And if you're going to be going into the construction trades, I could not recommend more highly going into the construction trades unions, right? Because if you're not in a union, actually, construction workers are 40% more likely than the average than the average worker in the United States to have to be on some sort of public assistance. They are much more likely to be on welfare or something because they don't in the construction industry, actually, most people don't make that much money. They don't make enough to have a good kind of middle class life. They don't have those kind of benefits. A lot of non-union construction jobs do not have health insurance. They certainly don't have retirements or pensions or things like this. So lots of reasons to join the trade unions. And you can become an apprentice even if you are not young, right? We actually spoke to somebody, this has been probably 2 years ago now, who turned his life around. He was from Alabama, born and raised in Alabama, but he sowed wild oats and was in prison in New York for multiple years and came back home in his late 20s and joined the Ironworkers, went through the apprenticeship program, and now, he's got 2 kids, he's got a wife, he's got a house, living a really great kind of super stereotypical, middle-class American life because of the Ironworkers Union, and because he was able to get that second chance. So whether you're 18 coming right out of high school or you are in some sort of, transition phase in your life and you want to start over somewhere else, joining the Ironworkers Apprenticeship Program is a great place to go. And really any trade union apprenticeship program, but I just happened to notice this deadline coming up. And so I wanted to tell you all about it. The deadline is July the 12th. That is the last day to apply for the Ironworkers Apprenticeship Program, July the 12th. And now I'm not entirely sure about what all the requirements are for applying. So on Monday, you're going to want to call their office. That's 256-383-3334. Going to want to call their office and ask them, how do I apply to become an apprentice? I believe you have to go in person to Sheffield and drop off an application, get an application, and then fill it out and drop it off. I believe that's the case. And their address is 506 Nashville Avenue, Sheffield, Alabama 35660. 506 Nashville Avenue, Sheffield, Alabama 35660. Again, that phone number is 256-383-3334. That's 256-383-3334. And the deadline to apply is July the 12th. That is Friday. You only have 1 week if you want to apply to be in the Ironworkers Apprenticeship Program. You need to get on that. So reach out to the Ironworkers for details about how to enroll and, start a good life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great career option, and I just wanted to personally, shout out Ironworkers 477. They have been great to work with. They have been great supporters of this project here at the Valley Labor Report, from the beginning, and they are also great allies of the North Alabama Area Labor Council. They're based in the Sheffield area. They don't have to participate in the North Alabama Area Labor Council. They have one in the Northwest Alabama. But they do it because they really care about working folks, not just the members that are in their local, but they really care about working folks in Alabama. Anytime there's something going on as a labor movement, we can always count on Local 477. So I want to, just give a shout out to Jeb and Eddie and Otis and all those guys out there. They do a lot of great work with their members, getting good work, good paying jobs, good careers for these folks. Something we promote a lot when we talk to young people. But like you said, Jacob, anybody who's looking for a career change, whatever the situation, if you're working with your hands or want to work with your hands, the building trades apprenticeship programs are definitely the way to go. And we're big fans of Local 477 for sure. We really appreciate the Ironworkers. We got a chance last summer to visit their apprenticeship competition in Chattanooga for the entire Southeastern District, and it was amazing just to see the skills that these people have.
Yeah.
Things that, I could never do, or, maybe I could if they train me up, right? And that's the thing. They do train you up and build you up and build you a really solid career where you can work wherever you want to work. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely hit them up. And we really appreciate 477 for all they do for the labor movement here in Alabama.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just for men either. There are, women can join the trade unions. There's a big push within the trade unions to try to, diversify their membership and get more women in the trades. And when we were at the Southeastern Ironworkers Apprenticeship competition, we did see a few women. And they were very good. They were, really I was about to say holding their own, but that would, be as if it's kind of surprising that they were holding their own. It's not surprising. And then they did. They held their own, and they were really doing the ironworker stuff just as good as the men. And so it was really exciting to see. If you're,
and if you think of anyone, that's the thing, like maybe you're listening and that's not really for you, but you may know some folks in your life that need a career change, or they're young folks coming out of high school, they need something to do. Steer them into an apprenticeship program, because it's not just the good wages and the great benefits that they get. It's being part of a community, being part of something bigger than yourself, having sisters and brothers there who have your back. It's a cliche often in America that like your company is your family, or bosses often say, oh, we're a family at this business, at this company. But when you're in a union, there's truth to that. You really are union siblings, and you look out for one another. And that's really important, I think, for folks. You need that. You need that sense of community and camaraderie. So, yeah, can't recommend it enough.
Yep. And again, just Local 477 in particular, they're really great. They'll treat you right, and they'll do what they can to make sure that your apprenticeship is successful. So
absolutely.
That phone number one more time is 256-383-3334. We have Vonda in the chat, president of the Nashville Labor Council. Trades are careers, not just jobs. Wonderful opportunities, best training and safety practices in the trades unions, and lots of sisters in the brotherhoods. So and
they're doing really cool stuff in Nashville with the Music City construction careers. They're doing really cool stuff. Getting in the schools, they have a whole pipeline of talent. I mean, it's really impressive.
That was one more thing that I wanted to say before we wrapped up this segment, is that if you are, Adam said, if this doesn't apply to you don't feel like, but you might know somebody who would be interested in an apprenticeship program, we're going to clip this and you can send that to them for their information, and maybe they'll want to get an apprenticeship. But also, if you have any relationships in the schools schools in North Alabama. The North Alabama Labor Council has been building on a program to get particularly the building trades in the schools to be at career fairs, to speak to history and social studies classes, to speak to students at the career tech centers about opportunities in the building trades unions. So, you can reach out to us, tvlr.fm/contact. And, we happen to know people in the Labor Council. We might know a couple of people in the Labor Council. So we'll pass that on, and we'll work on getting some folks in your school. And that's even middle schools. I mean, we'd be down to talk to anybody about unions, the opportunities that they present today, some of their history, and it is part of Alabama's history standards is to teach about there is a labor history part of the curriculum in Alabama that has to be taught. And so Adam was a public school teacher, and he's developed a curriculum that we as the North Alabama Labor Council come into history classes and teach for the teachers, like have guest lectures, and it's to Alabama's history standards. But then you get that added benefit of actually having us bringing in union members talking about how, okay, you just learned the history. What is it like today? And so it's a really unique opportunity for the kids that we do through the Labor Council, and we're really proud of it. So yeah, if you know somebody that would be interested in the apprenticeship program, forward this information to them. And if you have connections in the schools, let us know and reach out to us, and we work with anybody to try to get some of these lessons in the schools.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break really quick, and we are going to be right back. We're going to be talking some about this the silica rule that Republicans in the House are trying to kill. So stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 is the phone number if you want to call in. Otherwise, we'll see you here in a second.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit nalc.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you want to give us a call, the phone lines are open. Adam, what you got for us?
Well, for those of you who don't know, we air live on WVNN, the right-wing talk radio station in Huntsville, Athens, every Saturday from 9:30 to 11, with our overtime after 11 airing online on YouTube and Facebook. We got our start on WVNN, which is, oddly enough, the birthplace of Sean Hannity and home to all sorts of reactionary propaganda that we personally find objectionable. But we think it's important to get a different perspective out there to multiple audiences. We're happy that a portion of the show is replayed during the week on WZZA, the historic black radio station in Northwest Alabama, and on WHIV, a community radio station in New Orleans. And of course now newly on WMMT, a community radio station in Whitesburg, Kentucky. We release the full episode on Spotify, Apple, and the various podcasting apps every week. So please subscribe to us on your app of choice and give us a good review. That stuff really does help. And throughout the week, clips of the show are released as standalone videos on YouTube and occasionally on TikTok as well. So if there's a particular segment that you enjoyed, or if there's an interview that you'd like to share with someone, you can check out our YouTube or Facebook channels, and you can find those clips throughout the week. Just do us a favor, hit subscribe, hit like. All of our content is free, completely free. So special thanks to all of you who donate, all of you who comment, all of you who called in. We love all the engagement from the audience, so we really do appreciate those of you who do that, who participate. If you've reviewed us, if you've shared our stuff with anybody on social media, it means a lot to us, because that engagement on the social media apps and the podcasting apps, that kind of stuff does help. It's a quick, easy way to support the project. We recognize that funds are tight for a lot of folks. We are by and for working class folks. That means our audience is working class folks. That means most of us don't have a whole lot of extra money. But if you believe it's important to have media that is, by and of and for the Southern working class, do consider supporting us however you can. If you can chip in a few bucks at tvlr.fm/donate, of course, that would be really appreciated. We love and appreciate our monthly donors. Those individual donors mean the world to us because it's the single biggest source of revenue we have. We rely on the combination of advertising and the grassroots donations. But even if you can't afford to donate, we still really appreciate the good word of, spreading the good word and telling your coworkers, your friends, your family, your neighbors. There's a lot of good causes out there to support. But we do think it's important that we have news and analysis and commentary from a working class perspective. We think it's important that folks hear about unionism and hear about labor unions in a positive way, and not just the anti-union propaganda that bosses and politicians unleash on us. Bosses and politicians have their own media, and we need media too as working people. We need to spread the message of solidarity and the message of collective action and the message of people power, because that's how we're going to make things better in this country, in this state, in this community. It's when everyday working people come together, unite across our differences, and fight for our common interest. That's the kind of message that we want to amplify. We want to amplify the voices of working people in the media, because it's really rare to find everyday working folks out there in corporate mainstream media. And of course, you have an entire ecosystem of extreme right-wing media airing on, stations such as WVNN, which spread all sorts of divisive, propaganda, false information, really inflammatory information, stuff that is meant to confuse people, stuff that is meant to get you upset at the wrong folks, rather than paying attention to the ones who are truly behind exploitation and oppression in this society. So for all those reasons, that's why we do the Valley Labor Report. It's important to us that we get this message out. We'd love to spread the message and get on more radio stations and, spread our audience and our reach, our footprint across the state of Alabama and across the Deep South. Nowhere needs it more than the South, I think, because of, the decades and decades of just divisive propaganda that we've been exposed to down here. It's really powerful, and so it's going to take a lot to counteract that. And so we need folks who are doing this work, and we really appreciate all of you who support it. So if you can, chip in a few bucks at tvlr.fm/donate. But even if you can't, just you listening and sharing and supporting our work really does mean a lot to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Robert Adderholt is part of a coalition of Republicans who are trying to kill a life-saving mine safety regulation in the U.S. House of Representatives. Specifically, they put forward an addendum to the fiscal year 2025 Department of Labor Appropriations Act that says, quote, "None of the funds made available by this act may be used to administer, implement, or enforce the proposed rule entitled Lowering Miners' Exposure to Respirable Crystalline Silica and Improving Respiratory Protection." And so that just basically said, what that means is pretty much what it says. You cannot use any funds in this act to enact this rule that has been implemented, that has been announced. And that is really, really, really gross. Robert Adderholt represents several thousands of coal miners in his district. And so, reasonably, the UMWA, and they are UMWA coal miners, United Mine Workers of America, the UMWA has blasted this amendment to the Department of Labor Appropriations Act, saying that Adderholt is, quote, prioritizing industry profits over the health and safety of the very workers that he was elected to represent. The miners miners in his district, many of whom already suffer from black lung disease, deserve better than this. I can only conclude that Adderholt is telling his constituents that their lives and health are of no concern to him. And it's difficult to deduce anything other than that because this crystalline silica, we've been covering this on the Valley Labor Report for now over a year. I was just looking up friend of the show Kim Kelly's article in These Times. That came out in May of 2023, and we had been talking to her about the silica problem in coal mines before that. But basically, the problem is that this silica dust is a new vector for creation of black lung. Right? The thing that created black lung among miners in the late 1800s and early 1900s was the coal dust itself. And so, as a result of that, there were significant regulations that were passed. The unions made significant progress on enforcing those regulations and on making collective bargaining agreements that had safety standards over and above the regulations, and they were able to get the rate of black lung down to only 1 in 30. Only 1 in 30 coal miners, as recently as a decade ago, right? Back in the 2010s, this was the rate of black lung among coal miners who had been working underground for 20 to 24 years, right? And so that's, that may still seem like a lot, and it is a lot, and there's still, even from that point, there could be progress made on that to further protect coal miners from the scourge of black lung. But instead, we have gone backwards, and some of it is, some of it happens because silica is different, right? And so the reason that silica is now the primary, ingredient in a black lung case is that as coal seams have been mined, they are having to mine deeper and in thinner coal seams, and so they are getting more of the, more rocks and sediment and non-coal in the mining operations. And so they didn't really deal with silica, 100, 200 years ago while they were mining, because they didn't have to, the coal was just kind of there and you could just mine that. Well, you got to go deeper and you got to get a lot more chaff to get the wheat today in the coal mines, so to speak. Right? And so they're coming up on a lot of this silica, and black lung is now afflicting more than 1 in 8 coal miners who have been working underground for 20 to 24 years. Right? So this is like more than a 3-fold increase in the incidence rate of black lung because of silica. Because the regulations were not made to protect people from silica. The collective bargaining agreements that the unions have had were not made to protect people from silica. And so this is a novel concern. And so as recently as, as far back as the Obama administration, the Department of Labor had been trying to, under the Obama administration is when this started really becoming an issue, like, oh, silica is really the main problem now. We need to update the regulations to account for that, right? And so under the Obama administration, there was an attempt to pass a regulation that coal mines would have to keep the parts per million of silica dust in a coal mine to the same level that the construction industry has to keep silica dust to, right? Because silica dust is not, it's new in the coal mines, but it's not a novel thing. Other industries have had to deal with silica dust, and other industries have had regulations around silica dust. And yet, in coal mines, because silica wasn't really a primary problem, coal mines are allowed to have something like 4 times as much silica in the mines as a work site above ground, right? And so all the Obama administration tried to do was bring the silica regulation in the coal mines in line with the regulations for industries above ground. Okay? And that alone would save hundreds of lives of coal miners, no doubt. Right? If we could just bring the incident rate of black lung down to what it was a decade ago, 1 in 30, I mean, that's a lot of people that you are saving their life, right? And so what did the Trump administration do when they got in? Well, they scrapped the rule. So the Trump administration is really undoubtedly responsible for the deaths of many, many coal miners, just because of that rule alone. Well, when the Biden administration came into power, they began trying to re-implement this rule, and they have done that. They have implemented this rule that the Obama administration was trying to at the end of the second term. And now there's a big backlash from industry and from people who are beholden to industry, like the Republicans. And so that's what's happening right now, is that the Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives are trying to claw back this progress that has been made for coal miners. Right? I mean, and this is just it's such a frustrating thing to me, because these are the same people, Adderholt, and the people who, talk about how great he is and how great the Republican Party is. These are the same people that talk about how coal miners are being left behind by the Democratic Party, while they are explicitly fighting tooth and nail literal life-saving regulations for coal miners. It's absolutely disgusting. And here's another factoid for you about silica. It is 20 times more toxic than coal dust. 20 times more toxic than coal dust. And people like Robert Adderholt think that coal miners should just have to breathe it in. Just totally unregulated. That's what folks like Robert Adderholt believe. It's very, very frustrating. And like Cecil Roberts, International President of the United Mine Workers of America, I can only conclude that Adderholt is telling his constituents that their lives and health are of no concern to him. In addition, this is from the Alabama Political Reporter, Chance Phillips has been doing a really great job, and I recommend people read him in particular if you're going to be reading in the Alabama Political Reporter. Chance Phillips says, in addition to cutting funding for the new regulation on silica dust, the proposed bill would also prevent the Department of Labor from implementing new protections for non-immigrant temporary agricultural workers. A change making it harder for employers to classify workers as independent contractors, improvements to labor standards for apprenticeships, a clarification allowing retirement funds to incorporate environmental, social, and governance considerations, and a rule expanding who employees can use as a representative during OSHA workplace inspections. That's what all. In addition to trying to kill coal miners, the Republicans are trying to do all these other terrible things.
Just about every decent thing that DOL is trying to do.
Right. It's just, I mean, it's, some of these things, right, there are reasonable conversations that you can have about, like, I don't know, what should the optimal tax rate be, right? I don't know. We could have a conversation about that. And I'm not going to get so bent out of shape about it. We could have, there's lots of stuff like that, right? But the idea that coal companies, coal bosses, coal billionaires should just be able to triple the incidence of black lung among coal miners. And black lung is not a reversible disease. Once you get black lung, you will die from black lung. Unless something kills you first, like you're in a car accident, right? Black lung is not reversible. You will never recover from black lung. You will die from black lung if you get black lung. And the idea that we should just allow coal companies to triple the incidence of black lung without any regulatory response is just straight up evil. Is wicked. I don't know how else to describe it. But that's the position that some folks have. They say that it's totally fine for coal companies to increase the incidence of black lung 3 times in just the past decade. I mean, just in just the last 10 years, this is the increase that we're talking about. It's really shocking stuff. But now, look, the good news about this is that it is unclear if these restrictions are going to survive a vote on the House floor, much less get passed by the Senate, right? So there's, and that's from Chance Phillips, and that analysis is correct. It's really not clear if they're going to be able to, are they going to be able to muster, even from their fellow Republicans, enough votes for, just killing coal miners? It's difficult to, kind of difficult to believe, but, I've seen crazier things, I suppose. But we'll see. And then also you've got, you're going to have even more difficulty in the Senate. But, so that was good news. Now I'm going to follow it out. Now we're going to chase it with some more bad news. You'll remember that the Supreme Court just overturned Chevron deference in its ruling on Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. And remember, Chevron deference basically said that if the agency's interpretation of a law is reasonable, right? I mean, even under Chevron deference, if there was an unreasonable interpretation of the law, it could still be overturned by the courts, right? And if there was a reasonable interpretation of the law that Congress didn't like, Congress could always pass a law in the next appropriations bill or something to say, no, that's not how we wanted you to interpret it. We're going to take this back, and we're going to, we want you to interpret it this way, or at least don't interpret it that way, right? These were always avenues under Chevron deference. What the overturning of Chevron did is now there's no deference for agencies, and the judiciary is taking all of the power when statutes are vague in the implementation of these statutes, right? So, if you pass a bill that says keep the water clean, then the EPA, under Chevron deference, had deference. The EPA had deference when it came to what does it look like to keep the water clean. Now the people who have the total control for the interpretation of what clean water means is the federal judiciary. It's absolutely absurd. And so now, even if this does not pass in the House and the Senate, and it does not get signed by the president, there is still a very real concern about the judiciary overturning this new regulation. One of the things that Phillips mentions in his article is a Texas judge issuing a preliminary injunction against the Federal Trade Commission's pending ban on non-compete agreements. A Kansas judge issued a similar injunction against anti-discrimination protections for the Department of Education. And a Texas judge also, if I remember correctly, issued an injunction against the heat protection standards. There was some other thing. The overtime protections. That's right. A judge in Texas said Texas does not have to abide by the new overtime protections from the Department of Labor. And so it's unclear if those new regulations are going to be able to survive in a judiciary that has been completely taken over by right-wing and corporate forces, and who are, just really salivating at the idea that they're going to be able to, put asbestos in your drinking water to make workers work longer for less, and to be able to kill coal miners. So, very scary things going on. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. The phone number is 844-899-8857. We're going to get to Boss Watch, and then we're going to head over into the second half of the program, Overtime, that we call Overtime, where we are going to be online, continue streaming online on Facebook and YouTube. You can find us at The Valley Labor Report. You can participate in our chat. Appreciate everybody who has participated in our chat so far. Huntsville Dimworker says, it's naturally Adderholt, of course. Adderholt never did anything for his district, so that's consistent. And silica's dangers were not known in the past. Indeed, clay contains a lot of silica. Yeah. Dwayne says, above-ground limestone quarries in Alabama hold the potential for silica contamination. Indeed. Rusty says, deregulation for more production and jobs or destruction of the whole industry. It's your vote. There you go. Huntsville Dim Worker says, wonder who contributes to Adderholt's campaign. Almost certainly the Council of Coal Mine Bosses do. Almost certainly. So yeah, appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got some 25, 30 people watching us on the YouTube. If you haven't liked the stream, go ahead and do that. Also subscribe to the channel. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and get to Boss Watch, and then we're going to get to the second half of the program where we have Hamilton Nolan lined up. We're going to be talking to him about the UFCW, Unite Here, and his new book, The Hammer. It's a really great book. I've been reading it, almost done with it. Highly recommend folks pick it up. But yeah, let's get to Boss Watch, and then we'll head over into overtime. So in Florida, a federal workplace safety investigation found that a Florida labor contractor could have prevented the fatal illness of a 41-year-old worker who collapsed while harvesting oranges at Alico Farms in December 2023 by taking required steps to protect employees from hazards associated with high temperatures. Inspectors with the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, again, the OSHA is the thing that Clarence Thomas wants to completely dismantle. Inspectors with the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration learned the worker employed by Guerrero Ag LLC had difficulty talking and appeared disoriented before becoming unresponsive and collapsing, symptoms consistent with a person suffering from heat stroke. Sadly, the worker died 3 days later in intensive care. OSHA determined the heat index reached approximately 92 degrees on the day of the incident. OSHA cited Guerrero Ag for 2 serious violations for exposing workers to hazards associated with high ambient heat on 3 separate days and not providing first aid training to employees working in an area without an infirmary, clinic, or hospital. The agency also cited the Arcadia-based labor contractor for failing to report a work-related hospitalization within 24 hours and subsequently the fatality within 8 hours as required by law. Guerrero Ag faces $30,000 in proposed penalties. In September 2021, the department announced enhanced and expanded measures to protect workers from the hazards of extreme heat. OSHA has developed a potential standard for workplaces to prevent heat illness and injury in work environments in general industry, construction, maritime, and agriculture. The agency also took an important step in addressing the dangers of workplace heat and moved closer to publishing a proposed rule to reduce the significant health risks of heat exposure for U.S. workers in outdoor and indoor settings. In April 2023, OSHA presented the draft rule's initial regulatory framework to the Advisory Committee on Construction Safety and Health. The committee unanimously recommended OSHA move forward swiftly on the notice of proposed rulemaking. The initial regulatory framework materials from the meeting are available in a docket on regulations.gov, and updates on the rulemaking process will be provided on OSHA's heat rulemaking webpage. OSHA concluded the Small Business Regulatory Enforcement Fairness Act process on November 3rd, and on June the 11th, the agency submitted its draft standard on heat injury and illness prevention to the Office of Management and Budget's Office of the Information and Regulatory Affairs for review. And actually, since this press release, they have announced that new rule. So, exciting news if that is allowed to stand. In the coal mining industry, the U.S. Department of Labor announced that its Mine Safety and Health Administration completed impact inspections in May 2024 at 15 mines in 12 states, leading the agency to cite 300 violations and 1 safeguard. MSHA's impact inspections since 2023 have identified 3,800 violations, including over 1,000 significant and substantial violations and 68 unwarrantable failure findings. An SNS violation is one that could contribute in a significant and substantial way to the cause and effect of a safety or health hazard. Violations designated as unwarrantable failures occur when an inspector finds aggravated conduct that constitutes more than ordinary negligence. The agency conducts impact inspections at mines that merit increased agency attention and enforcement due to poor compliance history, previous accidents, injuries, and illnesses, and other compliance concerns. Of the 300 violations MSHA identified in May of 2024, 62 were evaluated as significant and substantial, and 5 had unwarrantable failure findings. The agency completed these inspections at mines in Kentucky, Mississippi, Missouri, Texas, and West Virginia, among others. In Georgia, a 5-man crew's first day working to remove tar and stone from metal roof panels at a Macon warehouse ended abruptly in November 2023 when a 54-year-old laborer tragically suffered fatal injuries after stepping on a skylight and falling about 19 feet. A U.S. Department of Labor investigation found that the Georgia construction contractor could have prevented the fall by providing their employees with required fall protection. Investigators with the department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration determined that the employee of NORD LLC in Johns Creek stepped on the skylight after dumping debris off the warehouse's roof. An ambulance rushed the worker, who suffered severe injuries, to a nearby hospital where they succumbed to their injuries hours later. In addition, NORD LLC failed to notify OSHA of the incident within the required 8 hours. OSHA's inspection found the company failed to protect its employees by not using fall protection systems, leaving skylights without safety guardrails on the roof the day of the fatal incident. And despite this tragic incident, agency inspectors once again found NORD LLC allowing employees to work without these life-saving measures 2 months later after OSHA was notified of the violations. I mean, can you imagine that? Wow. Somebody literally died. Somebody literally died because of your negligence, and only 2 months later, you're already doing the negligent thing again. I mean, that's just really wild. That's really wild. OSHA identified 9 serious violations by NORD LLC that exposed workers to falls and other hazards when the company did the following. They failed to provide fall protection systems to workers on a roof at heights of 19 feet. They failed to install covers or guardrails on the roof's skylights. They permitted workers to use a forklift, elevating workers on a pallet to the upper roof level. They improperly used extension ladders that failed to reach at least 3 feet higher than the top of the roof. They allowed employees to use a ladder with structural defects. They permitted workers to operate nail guns at 120 psi without protective eyewear. They did not train forklift operators to operate powered industrial trucks, and they failed to report within 8 hours the death of an employee resulting from a work-related incident. In addition, the agency cited the employer with a serious violation for not ensuring the availability of accessible medical treatment for the injured employee. OSHA proposed $60,000 in penalties to address the violations. Had a few dishonorable mentions. A worker died at the construction site of the new mega prison in Elmore County, Alabama, reportedly after a worker fell from a building under construction. Elmore Autauga News reports that the site is currently shut down and will be shut down as the investigation continues. A Tennessee construction contractor could have prevented an employee's fatal fall at a Smyrna, New York job site in December 2023 by providing adequate fall protection and training employees in its effective use. And Hochen's Food Group, a large owner and operator of retail, grocery, convenience, and hardware stores and quick service restaurants headquartered in Bowling Green, Kentucky, will pay $40,000 and furnish other relief to settle a religious discrimination lawsuit that alleged the company refused to hire an individual who could not cut their dreadlocks due to their religious beliefs. That is going to be it for us on the program today. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like I said, we've got a great overtime lined up for you. We'll be taking calls right at the top of the second half of the program. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. We're also going to be talking to Hamilton Nolan about efforts to reform the UFCW. Some interesting stuff happening there. And Unite Here's new leadership. Unite Here is a service and hospitality union, and particularly some of the work that they've been doing in the South. We'll also be talking generally about his new book, why he wrote it, and why people should read it. It's really good. I recommend it. And the NEA staff is on strike, and actually Biden respected the picket line of the NEA staff, which is a really interesting dynamic and laudable. So we'll be talking about that. Mississippi's welfare scandal has an update where people like Brett Favre stole millions of dollars in welfare money from the citizen. Allegedly stole millions of dollars in welfare money from Mississippians, and the only people who are going to go to jail for this alleged theft are the people who reported on it. That's astounding. Adam is going to be giving us some more details on that.
And you can find our website at tvlr.fm. You can make a one-time or monthly recurring contribution at tvlr.fm/donate. You can buy our logo caps at tvlr.fm/store. And as always, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. Find us on Facebook and YouTube, and we're going to keep the show going. So you've been listening to the Valley Labor Report. Again, we really appreciate your time. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. And if you don't find us online and keep listening to the show, we'll see you next week. Okay, off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. We're going to take a break really quick, and we'll be right back with the second half of the program. Stay tuned.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Yes, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Appreciate everybody tuning in and listening to the program. So, Adam, the National Education Association is the largest union in the United States. It represents some, 3 million teachers and education staff. And so being that large, they have a staff, the National Education Association, and that staff has unionized with the National Staff Organization. And the National Staff Organization went on strike during the NEA's convention. Now, this is it's difficult to imagine a higher escalation for a union staff than striking their constitutional assembly, right? I mean, right. I really can't imagine a higher escalation than that. So this must be indicative of some deep and, intractable issues between the staff and the National Education Association. And it's just difficult to understand why that would be. You worked for an NEA affiliate for some amount of time, for a significant amount of time. And so you've kept in touch with some of the folks who still work for NEA and their various affiliates. So what's going on?
Yeah. It is definitely an escalation. Like you said, for the union staff to strike the representative assembly, that's the largest Democratic assembly in the world, is my understanding. Mm-hmm. Like the largest event where you get a bunch of people in the same room voting on stuff. Yeah, that's the NEA-RA. So that's a really huge deal.
And how big is that? Like, what do they have, like 1,000 delegates or something crazy?
I don't even remember the amount. That'd be worth checking into. It's a really, really huge event. Folks from, all 50 states are there. It happens. It always coincides with the 4th of July. It's always this week. And so, yeah, I've been following, and I noticed that things have gotten pretty, tense between NESO and NEA. NESO is the National Education Association Staff Organization. They're an affiliate of the NSO, the National Staff Organization. That's the union that represents various NEA staffers as well as staffers at local and state affiliates. So it's a big deal. President Biden canceled his trip to speak to the Representative Assembly. It's taking place in Philadelphia. President Biden was supposed to be there, I believe, tomorrow in the conclusion of it. And he has announced that he will not be there. Kind of basically wraps up the convention as far as I can tell. My understanding is all the delegates were sent back to their hotel. So it's an unfair labor practice strike is basically what's happening. There's multiple unfair labor practice charges that have been filed against NEA, alleging refusal to furnish bargaining information and unilateral changes over working conditions. Prior report, and I'm getting this right here from StrikeWave, our friends over there. Prior reports indicated that the staff union had raised concerns over a manager allegedly assaulting a staff member and then retaliating once the alleged assault was reported. According to EdWeek, NESO members alleged that NEA responded to the strike by canceling hotels and travel for picketing staff without warning. Right? So they go on the picket line and then they find out that the hotels have been put back into their personal name and not, on the company card or whatever. And same for their flights. That's pretty wild for that to happen. NESO's strike action this weekend or yesterday on July 5th, it was the first NEA, or this summer has been the first time NEA staff has been on strike since the 1970s. Right, so that's a pretty big deal. These issues have been building for some time, is my understanding. I want to, look here at some of the stuff that NESO has put out. You can go to nesomatters.org. That's NEASO matters.org. That is the staff union's website. You can find out more information about why they're on this ULP strike. So basically, it was a tough decision from what the union is saying. They really, really didn't want to do this during Representative Assembly because it is basically a huge escalation. It is taking it to a whole nother level, right, to strike the convention, because that impacts the entire operations of the union. But that seems to be NEA's fault, frankly. NEA has let it get to this point. And so reading here from NISO, they said, "It breaks our hearts to have to take this action during the Representative Assembly. NISO members have been working for months to prepare for the arrival of NEA's members. We support NEA members and believe in the powerful work that takes place at the RA. NISO members love our work and the NEA members we serve. That's why we show up every day to work for respect and working conditions NEA members deserve. However, NEA has forced our hand by sharing that they would rather waste millions of dollars moving the RA online than deal fairly with their staff. This ULP strike is born out of the systemic problems we have brought to our employers' attention for years. To be clear, NEA management has forced its staff to strike by repeatedly ignoring us and refusing to practice what they preach." So they continue, "NISO needs your help to make NEA management listen to our demands and respect our staff union and our work. We ask that you uphold and respect our picket line by refusing to cross the picket line. If you are coming to the NEA building, they expect any partners, colleagues, or contractors to respect that picket line. And they also ask that folks refuse to do struck work. That means not taking on any work that would have otherwise been done by a NISO member currently on strike. Just a note that contractors observed crossing the picket line will not be recommended for future NEA work by NISO. So, you know, respect the picket line. What can partners do to support NISO and a fair contract? So NISO members are passionate about their work and care deeply about NEA members and the future of public education. You can sign the NISO Solidarity Pledge online to let NEA know that you stand with them. And you can also contact NEA leadership or your management partners and let them know you support NISO as well. So I recommend you go to nisomatters.org, sign the Solidarity Pledge. That's one easy way you can support these workers. If you're a member of NEA, and we know that we have members of NEA who listen to this program, you can reach out to your state affiliate. If that's Alabama, it's the AEA. You should reach out to them and the NEA leadership and support NISO and express a desire to see this resolved. It's really unfortunate when unions don't practice what they preach when it comes to their own employees. NEA claims to be the largest education union in the country, but all too often they don't actually act like a union. And that's certainly the case here in Alabama. In Alabama, the Alabama Education Association explicitly rejects unions and rejects unionism. It calls itself a professional organization or association. It is, opposed to collective action and collective bargaining and to the labor movement. I think NEA is dealing with some of its own internal issues. They have, folks who mistreat their employees, and they have some of these managers, who are making six-figure salaries, who get bounced from state to state to state. Association employees have been dealing with issues not just in Alabama, but in Arizona, in Virginia, in various affiliates. So you have state affiliates out there who are mistreating employees. NEA knows about that. NEA is also doing this to its own employees and has not been acting in good faith when it comes to its own staff union. And that's just, it's incredibly hypocritical, and it's just, I really appreciate the courage it took for NISO to go on strike this week. I know it was no easy feat, and I know it was a big deal, but I really hope it was a wake-up call to the delegates from all over the country who were there. I hope the delegates saw this and started asking questions about the direction of their union and what their union is supposed to be like and how it's actually operating. I think an engaged membership is how unions can be strong. Democracy is important. Transparency is important. Accountability is important. Members actually have to be engaged and have to be asking these questions. And if I were a member of NEA, and I certainly used to be, I would be asking, why? Why is management letting it get to this point? Why can't you settle with your own staff union? Why are you acting like the worst superintendents and school boards that we deal with, right? Just, it's very concerning. So I want to send my solidarity to all the NISO brothers and sisters out there, wishing them the best of luck, hoping this strike can be resolved. So, we'll see what happens. But I mean, this is definitely a big deal for the convention to face a strike, for the president to have to cancel his visit. Doesn't make NEA look very good. And a lot of NEA members need to be asking questions. And they need to ask, will the folks who are paid big bucks to run that organization, are they going to practice what they preach? Are they going to live up to the values that they supposedly believe in and express and state? Are they going to do that? Are they going to continue to act like bosses, right? The very bosses that they're supposed to be protecting you from. So, that's a real question that they have to wrestle with. And certainly if I were an educator, I would be asking questions about, what does this say about the culture of the organization that this would happen, right? Because like you said earlier, Jacob, to start this segment, I mean, it's clearly something that's been simmering for years. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just happen, right? So what does that say about the kind of culture at NEA, the kind of leadership that's going on there? Again, they can't figure out, in some cases, whether they're a labor union or, a professional organization. They can't figure out sometimes whether or not they're selling insurance or organizing workers. And there's some differences there, and you got to get on the right side of it. Right. So, sending my love and solidarity to NISO. Again, you can go to nisomatters.org to find out more.
And the number was 9,000. 9,000 delegates at the at the Assembly of the National Education Association. So huge. I mean, really, I'm sure that was a difficult decision to do that. So we have on the line Hamilton Nolan, author of The Hammer, a book about unions and how they are, really the key to changing the world. We're also going to be talking to him about some of his recent articles. Really excited for the conversation. Hamilton Nolan, welcome back to the program. Appreciate it.
Come on.
It's great to have you. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about was this article from a few months ago called "Can Grocery Workers Take Back Their Union?" And that's the union that you're referring to is the United Food and Commercial Workers, which represents some, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of workers at Kroger and Albertsons across the country, and is really, in many places, probably the most public-facing union, or it could be the most public-facing union. I think in a lot of places maybe it should be, but it's not. At basically every Kroger, there's a little sign out on the door that says this is a UFCW shop, but that's really, in a lot of cases, the only indication that you have that the workers inside are union. You very rarely see them wearing union buttons or union hats or anything like this. And so there is something just kind of in the way that people consumers interface with the UFCW that kind of indicates the need for a change. So if you could just kind of set the stage for it, like, why do they need to take it back? Who has it? What's going on?
Yeah, the UFCW is one of the biggest unions in America. I think the biggest private sector union in the AFL-CIO. It's over 1 million members. As you said, grocery industry is their bread and butter, but they cover a lot of industries, healthcare and meat packing and cannabis and many, many others. And so, they're a huge and potentially very strong union. And as you say, being the biggest union in the grocery industry, they're right there on the front lines of a consumer facing industry. And yet they've never really had a reputation for being much of a fighting union, much of an aggressive organizing union. Now they're so big that it varies a lot by locals. Obviously, they have some really great locals and they have some less great locals. But you think of when you think of sort of democratic reform movements inside of big unions, a lot of people think of the Teamsters with TDU, and they think of UAW with UAWD and getting Sean Fain elected. And there is a movement inside UFCW to try to make UFCW the next union like that, to have its own democratic reform movement. The reform is being led by UFCW Local 3000, which is the biggest local in UFCW, 50,000 member local based in Seattle. So it's a strong local. Faye Gunther is the president out there, and she and her team are trying to lead this reform effort inside of UFCW. They tried to push a slate of reforms at the last convention, UFCW convention a year ago, and most of those were shot down. The president of UFCW is Mark Perrone, who does not have a reputation, let's say, as a fighting union leader, as an organizing union leader. I have some reporting in the story from a guy named Todd Crosby, who was the organizing director at the International, and told me a lot about trying to get them to prioritize organizing more and trying to get them to fund organizing more, and the ways that was shot down by Mark Perrone when he was working there. And so, the reformers are trying to tap into all the advantages that the UFCW could have, being in the grocery industry, trying to organize at scale, being national, trying to make it into a powerful fighting union, which it has a lot of the pieces that could add up to making it one of the strongest unions in America, and it's not really taking advantage of that.
You mentioned about the current international leadership and that they're not really known for kind of a militant democratic organizing approach. And one of the things, and I don't think you mentioned this in your article, but I'm sure that you've seen it. The reform group has criticized it publicly. Some of the UFCW's contracting with like public relation firms during organizing campaigns or contract campaigns, and the recommendations that apparently, as far as I could tell from what the reform group was saying, were accepted by the UFCW. Recommendations like don't say union, or just really corporate kind of stuff, like play nicey nice with the boss. Do you recall that in more detail than I do?
Yeah, I know what you're referring to, and they had basically had some messaging guru type people in there to do exactly what you're talking about, and I think it just speaks to the culture of the leadership of that union, to not take the Sean Fain approach and take whatever you would say is the opposite of the Sean Fain approach. And you can think about even going back to the UFCW's Walmart campaign, which went on for many, many years and never organized any Walmarts, and was very much a more of a public relations campaign around Walmart workers, and you can, you could argue there were some good things done in that campaign, and of course any effort on behalf of workers I'm for. But if you're looking at how to spend a lot of money as a union on an important target like Walmart, that was the sort of campaign that was not an organizing not a union organizing campaign. It was a messaging campaign and a PR campaign. And I think that we can say with the benefit of hindsight that is a failed road to go down, And so to the extent that the leadership of UFCW is still listening to that kind of stuff, they're on the wrong path, especially when you have a counterexample of a UAW saying we're going to go down south and spend $40 million a year and try to unionize 150,000 workers. That is clearly the path that big unions need to take. And UFCW is twice as big as UAW. So you can imagine the potential if they really did make themselves an organizing union.
It really is, you see unions like this, and you see it one of the things that you talk about in your book, and we'll talk about this later more generally, but you look at a union like the UFCW, and you can really frustrate yourself thinking about what could be, like what this union could do, and how much power it really has that it's not using. And then that it could have if it used the power that it has. I mean, it really can kind of, it definitely frustrates me, and I see it not just in the UFCW. I see it all over the place. And so but I tend to be not. I tend to be very, very, very hesitant to like impugn the motives of like people like a Mark Perrone or other leadership of the unions. I mean, if they were, and the reason that I'm hesitant about that is because it's like, look, I mean, if they were really like these they hated working people and they just wanted to like milk profits from them and all this kind of stuff, they would just work for management. They would, and they would be great working for management because they could be the people who kind of turned around and like, look, I used to be a union guy and look, now I can tell you how bad it is, right? I mean, they could make more money and have potentially more power, maybe doing something else. And so there's a reason that they stay there and that they have the tactics that they do. But it's just very how do you see their justifications of of the tactics that they have right now and the reasons that they say they're not going down these more kind of militant organizing type of campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to Mark Perrone's personal motives because he wouldn't give me an interview, even though I wrote two of these stories, and he wouldn't speak to me for either one. So, look, I judge people by their actions. If you are the president of a union with 1 million members, you have a good deal of responsibility for what the union does. I mean, and I'm comfortable judging people according to their actions. I don't need to read anybody's minds. We can look at the budgets. Budgets are a statement of the union's priorities. We can look at the numbers we can look at the new organizing numbers. And we can look at the salaries. One of the reforms that the reformers were trying to push at the convention was to limit officer salaries in UFCW to $250,000 a year, which is a fairly modest reform to me, when you consider the fact that a lot of these members are grocery store workers making $30,000 a year and stuff like that. So they tried to push a reform to limit salaries to $250K. And that was shot down with extreme prejudice. And they gave me a spreadsheet of the salaries of every local president in UFCW. And there was a local president of UFCW in New Jersey making $700K a year. And there was a number of them making over $500K a year. Now, that to me is unconscionable. Right. There's simply no excuse for that. And Perrone does not make that much money. But I think just the fact that a reform like that can be shot down without even having a chance at an international union convention speaks to the values that the leadership of that union has.
Right. And you said that budgets are, a statement of your priorities. And so one of the things that was kind of interesting about your article was that the International Union disputed the idea that they were not investing in organizing. So walk us through those conversations and how the UFCW tried to back up its claims that, oh no, we're putting, what was it, 10% of the money into organizing? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it was interesting as a reporter. First of all, I wrote a story about the convention last year and these reformers, and I tried to interview Perrone for that story, and he wouldn't talk to me. And then I wrote another story, that was published earlier this year about where I went to Seattle and talked to the reformers and talked about what they were doing. And again, try to get an interview with Perrone and the International, and they would not speak to me. So, off the bat, when you find yourself as a reporter in a situation like that, I'm giving you an ample opportunity to say anything you want to say to me, and they're declining it. Mm-hmm. So then they did sort of dispute some of the assertions that were given to me by Todd Crosby, who again is a veteran union guy who works with UFCW 3000 and the Reformers, and who also worked in the International as organizing director. So he, had the opportunity to be in the International and see what the budgets were and advocate for the budgets. And the stuff he told me was from his own firsthand experience. And it was interesting because when they disputed it, saying things like, "Oh no, we actually are spending this much money on organizing," I was able to go back to Todd Crosby and say, "What do you think of this?" And his take was like, the term organizing can mean a lot of things, right? You add in, for example, comms, and you add in this, and you add in that, and you put it all under the category of organizing. You give the union the ability to say, "Oh, we're spending all this money on organizing." And he said that is what was happening in that case. And of course, the International would not send me a detailed breakdown, so I can't speak to the accuracy of what they said.
Right. Well, yeah. If you just call things organizing, then it does become pretty easy to say. Yeah. My salary is organizing because I'm. So there you go.
There you go.
So there's a reform effort. We've kind of been alluding to that, particularly kind of centered around UFCW 3000. So talk to us about. I guess let's get the background on UFCW 3000 first, and like why would I, if I were a UFCW worker, why would I want, in another part of the country in particular, why would I want to hand the reins over of my international union to this local union that I'm not a member of, that I don't know anything about? Why should people trust UFCW 3000? Talk about their record.
Yeah, they, as I said, are the biggest local in UFCW. They're very, very strong union in the Northwest. I went to the Labor Council in Seattle, and everybody said a lot of really nice things about the reputation that UFCW 3000 has out there in the entire Northwest. As an organizing union. They're a fighting union. They have Macy's workers that they went on strike for. Faye Gunther is who's the president of the union, is sort of a committed, a real activist type from day one, who went into labor, out of more general activism, and who kind of carries that into the union. But I think if you look at what the reformers are asking for, it's not so much that they're asking to turn the control of the International over to UFCW 3000. They are trying to push this sort of good government type reforms, as I said, like limiting salaries, spending more on organizing, doing the things that you would hope that a fighting union would do. And I know that, they're early on in their campaign. If you think about, TDU, that went on for decades and decades inside of the Teamsters, and UAWD, didn't go on for that long, but they did have a years-long fight. And so I would say they're at the very early stages inside of UFCW. But what they're going to need to do is go out and expand from the Northwest and start enlisting members is what they want to do. They want to almost have a road show and go out and enlist members to put pressure on their own locals, because ultimately they need to get a lot of the locals inside of UFCW on their side to help them make these reforms. Because again, they need one member, one vote. Which UFCW doesn't have, and which is a key to a lot of democratic union reforms. So the process of getting these things passed is going to involve either getting a lot of local presidents on their side, or really having a grassroots uprising where you get a lot of members on your side. And either way, grocery workers are going to have to buy into the idea, that they can be powerful. One thing they're asking for is national contracts. Like you touched on them having Kroger and big grocery companies like that, and they don't have national contracts for those companies. Right. Think of, UPS and the Teamsters, where you have a huge national contract and enables you to put so much leverage on the company. And UFCW doesn't have that. That's an example of the type of bigger strategic thinking that goes hand in hand with organizing. You organize the parts that need to be organized. You negotiate nationally, and you increase the leverage for the workers. So that's the type of thing they want to do.
Right. And, you said that they have a really good reputation for being an organizing union. They just won a good contract for Macy's workers. You had in your piece something about, they've been able to organize new shops too, haven't they?
they do organize new shops. They're constantly, I think I had the numbers and I don't have the piece in front of me, but they did give me their new organizing numbers. They're organizing a lot of cannabis industry out there in the Northwest, which is a new industry, you know, that they're trying to really brand themselves as the cannabis union. They have a ton of, I went to a strike authorization vote for nurses that they had at a hospital there in Washington State. So they have a broad range of workers, you know, but their bread and butter is the grocery industry. And that's probably their biggest power base. You know, they wanted also UFCW to start a healthcare division to consolidate the power of the healthcare workers in that union, which was another fight they were trying to have at the last convention that they were getting pushed back on. So yeah, I mean, they're definitely an organizing union, but I think when you think of UFCW nationally, you automatically think of the grocery industry. And again, when you look at things like Trader Joe's, where you have an independent union effort launched at Trader Joe's, it's a little symptomatic of a failure of UFCW, right? Why didn't UFCW organize Trader Joe's 10 years ago? Why haven't they organized Whole Foods? These are things where the absence of a union kind of points at some of the failures of the international conceptually, I think.
Right. And so one of the things that did kind of surprise me, you know, you mentioned that the TDU had a decades-long history within the Teamsters, and UAWD, while they didn't have a decades-long history in the UAW, there have been decades of reform efforts in the UAW. You know, the UAW has been no stranger to reform efforts, and it seems like UFCW 3000 and the reform efforts around them, they want to be operating on a much shorter timeline because they are, they're not putting it out as, as necessarily part of their plan, but they were willing to speak publicly and openly with you about the idea that if we are not able to, in a soon enough time frame, to be able to implement some of these reforms in the UFCW, they are openly considering disaffiliation from the UFCW and the organization of a new alternative union for grocery store workers. How are they, kind of weighing that against, the prospects of reform and, the timeline? How did that conversation feel, I guess?
Yeah, you're right. They were extremely open with me, which I love as a reporter, and is a little bit uncommon sometimes. As a reporter, you don't get people from big organizations necessarily voicing their thoughts that openly. But yeah, I did have a conversation with Joe Mizrahi, who is the sort of number two to Faye Gunther within that union. And he was really talking about, look, if this reform stuff doesn't work, or if it becomes clear that it's not going to be possible, one thing we could do as sort of a nuclear option is like, yeah, we're the biggest local and we could disaffiliate from UFCW. And he said, they send so much money to the international, they send a lot of per caps into the international. And he was like, we could just go out on our own and we could hire something like 80 organizers with the money that we are sending to the international, so that would be a way for them to just take their money and do what they want. If they came to the conclusion that reform is not possible. Now that's not a plan I think that is imminent, but it does go to show that they're, and look, it's reasonable. Anybody that's in a union that they think is bad or is not doing what needs to be done is probably weighing those kind of options in their mind, because if you send that much money into an organization that is sitting on it and not doing what they want to do, and look, 80 union organizers can do a lot of organizing. 80 union organizers could start unionizing Whole Foods and things like that and open the door into Amazon. So that's a lot of manpower that you have to think seriously about. And hopefully that's a point of leverage for them with the international also.
Right.
So the other union, and it's another kind of service sector hospitality union that you've been following reasonably closely, and you just had an interview with their new international president, is Unite Here. And they are, there's something maybe closer to what the reform groups in the UFCW would like to see their union turn into. So, talk to us about, you're a big fan of, you're a big booster, I think, for Unite Here. So why is that?
Yeah, like Unite Here, I don't think Unite Here has one member, one vote, so they're not perfect. No union is perfect, but
right.
Unite Here is a hospitality workers union. It's a mid-sized union. I think around 300,000 members, a little less than 300,000 members. Really got their ass kicked during the pandemic because they had so much unemployment in the industries where they represent people. But they've come back from that. D. Taylor, who was a longtime president of Unite Here, is retired. And Gwen Mills is going to be a successor. She's a very smart, politically minded, strategic person who was the head of their political program for a long time. I mean, what I like about Unite Here is just that they have a sort of formula that runs through the hospitality industry in any given city and then can really scale up into political power. So I wrote a couple chapters about them in my book. As an example, a good example of a union building political power through labor organizing, and not vice versa, and not building political power by spending $200 million, for example, on the Biden campaign, which is what SEIU is doing this year.
Love it.
But, you look at like Las Vegas, where the Culinary Union really spent 80 years organizing every casino on the Strip. Striking whenever they need to strike, and seeing every fight as an existential fight, knowing that the industry is trying to break the back of the union in every single fight, going on long strikes when they need to, and just putting everything into new organizing, and then again putting everything into internal organizing and keeping the members mobilized at all times, and constantly having meetings with the members and keeping them energized. And that's what allows them to be such a powerful political force, because they can turn out thousands of people for door knocking. They can turn out thousands of members to knock doors in swing states for the Democrats in important midterm elections and presidential elections, So they punch above their weight as a union because they're always organizing, new organizing, and then internal organizing to keep members engaged with the union. And it's just like, it's pretty basic stuff on one level, but they do it well, they do it consistently, and they have a formula that could be replicated in many, many cities. One of the chapters in my book was about New Orleans and Miami, and looking at Unite Here in those cities and being like, can you build something that is like what they have in Vegas in other cities, And I think by organizing the heart of any tourist industry in a tourist city, you absolutely can, and Unite Here doesn't have a ton of resources. And I think the resources are their big constraint. For example, in organizing all the hotels in New Orleans, they don't have that kind of manpower. But if you can get there, you can really, really build working class power, even in red states, using that formula.
Right. And you spoke about some of their work in Florida and Louisiana, for example, as kind of, utilizations of that blueprint in red states. What were some of the key things about some of their work in New Orleans and Orlando and Miami that you found kind of inspiring?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the basic insight is like, you're a hospitality union. If you can go into a city that has a tourist economy, where tourism is a crucial part of the economy of that city, and you organize the big hotels and the convention center and the stadiums and the airport, once you've done that, you kind of have the heart of the tourist economy in your union, right? And then you have a lot of control, actually, if you're willing to exercise that labor power in smart ways over the local economy. And so all of a sudden, if you're able to do that organizing and keep those workers mobilized, you can really start making demands in the local economy that politicians have to listen to. Because if you shut down that tourist economy, it has big, big ripple effects throughout that city. And that is true even in red, Louisiana is a super red state. Florida is a quasi red state. But it kind of doesn't matter, because you're wrapping your hands around the heart of the local economy and you're creating that mobilized labor power. And then you exercise it, and you can raise standards for the whole working class in those cities by doing that, so it's really a formula that can work. You can think right now of probably a dozen cities throughout the country where you're like, tourism is the heart of the economy of this city. And even if it's in a red state, if you can organize A, B, C, D, and E, they're going to have to listen to you. And that's kind of what Unite here, when you look at it in different cities around the country, it's kind of in different stages of being able to do that. In Vegas, it's really fully realized. Like Vegas is the place where you can really see it in action with the culinary union. And in other cities, especially down south, it's more of a work in progress, but there's no reason they can't get there. It's really just an organizing question.
Right. And I'm looking forward to seeing them continue to invest in the South, and I think at one point we had International President D. Taylor on when he was still president, and he talked about how they had organized 40,000 new members in the South, is my understanding. If I'm recalling right, it's been like a couple of years since we've talked to him, but yeah, I mean, really exciting work, and I'm looking forward to seeing them continue. Gwen Mills was just elected international president, and she has made a commitment to redouble their organizing efforts, and with a particular focus on the South. Folks can read your interview with her on your Substack, How Things Work. HamiltonNolan.com. But what were some of the highlights from that interview that you think were really important for folks to take away?
Yeah, as you said, she announced that they were doubling their new organizing spending, I believe up to $20 million. And that's a big deal. That tells me that she kind of grasps the moment that we're in, and the fact that it's time to strike while the iron is hot for unions. And you have to take advantage of the good sentiment that we have now to do that new organizing. And so anytime I see a union, investing in new organizing to that degree, I mean, that tells me a lot about the president and the leadership of that union, and sort of the fact that they understand the big picture of what's happening in labor. The other thing that I always thought that Gwen Mills was kind of smart on the topic of is just like the way that being in a union can help democracy as a whole, like American democracy, and Unite Here is a union that puts a lot of resources, as I said, into going out and doing that door knocking and stuff like that makes it really valuable to the Democratic Party for that reason. But also, I think she understands, and she talked a little bit about, the experience of being in a union and how that can teach working people about, sort of give them the experience of being in a democratic organization and seeing how democracy works within the union, and then being able to project that out into the nation as a whole and the political system as a whole, and that's kind of what you want to see from every union. You would hope that people, when they get into unions, can use a union as a sort of political education tool for working people, and also a springboard for working people to go on and run for office. She talked about having union members run for office. I asked her about the frustrations that people have with the Democratic Party, and her reaction was basically like, we just need to take over the Democratic Party. We need to just run union members for office and take it over, which is something that they've done in certain places. So I thought that was interesting.
Right. Yep. I agree. I think labor would probably be a better runner of the Democratic Party than the Democratic Party. So looking forward to Gwen Mills doing that. So finally, wanted to wrap up on your book, The Hammer. And we talked about some of these stories are in your book, but just generally, what is the thing that you want people to take away from your book when they read it?
I hope, I really try to write it so that anybody can read it. You don't have to be like a labor person to read it. You don't have to be a union member. You don't have to really have ever thought about unions, hopefully, to read it, and I just want people to be able to think about how important the role of organized labor is in American society, and the fact that the decline of organized labor is a direct cause of a lot of the bigger political and social and economic problems that kind of torture people and that make them feel that America is broken. And also to show them that that is something that can be turned around. This is not static. Like, we can revive the labor movement. We can turn around the decline of union density. And we can reverse that huge rise of inequality that is kind of screwing up our nation in so many ways and has been for at least 2 or 3 generations now. So I just hope that if people read it, they can think about, the centrality of organized labor to all of these other problems, and using organized labor as a tool to fix all these other problems. And also the fact that we have a moment of opportunity now that could very easily be squandered if we don't really act with urgency and vision and ambition and big investment in this moment.
That's a question that we've asked a few people now about that, and obviously we believe the same thing, that unions and organized working people are really the center if you want to change anything in the country or the world, frankly. But that is not a sentiment that is shared. There are some that believe that unions are just one among many special interest groups. Sometimes they do good things, sometimes they do bad things, but they only represent their members, and they're not really a broader social force, and you shouldn't think of them as a broad social force. And so in the interest of operating in the interest of their members, they will sometimes do things that are ancillarily beneficial for other people, and sometimes they'll do things that are ancillarily harmful for other people. Is kind of this alternative sentiment. And there's this one YouTube streamer, Destiny, who has that opinion. Basically, he's not a big fan of unions, not a super antagonistic to them, but he's just like, they're just What would you say? How would you justify, right, your belief that unions and working people are really central to changing the world, changing the country? How would you justify that thesis?
I mean, a union is a tool, right? A union is a tool that is wielded by people. And so as an observation of reality, it is completely true that sometimes unions do bad things. Sometimes unions are selfish. Sometimes unions are short-sighted. All those things are true because unions are run by people. But what we know, and what we know from American history even, is that the more people have unions, the more all these good things happen. The more union density goes up, the more economic equality we have, the greater the power of the working class, the less the power of the oligarchs. The more equal our political system is, the more responsive our political system is to working people's needs. Safety goes up, discrimination goes down. All these great things come with an increase in union density and union power. So I mean, it's not surprising that a lot of people don't think about the labor movement as the answer to all their problems, because most people aren't involved in the labor movement. So I say to the general public, I try to say all these things about how many good things can happen with the power of organized labor, but when I speak to the labor movement, I try to say, look, it's our responsibility to go out and give unions to the 90% of people that don't have them, because it's no surprise that people don't give a damn about organized labor when only 10% of people are union members. That's ridiculous. We have to go unionize millions and millions of new people. That is the task of the labor movement. That's our responsibility. And all the great potential things that labor can do are not going to come true if we don't do that, if we don't go out and give unions to the millions of people that don't have them. So, I mean, I'm never surprised if someone is skeptical about unions or has had a bad experience with unions, but I hope that people can think about the possibilities and what can be, and then think about what we need to do to make that come true.
Hamilton Nolan, you can read his Substack at hamiltonnolan.com, and the book is called The Hammer: Power, Inequality, and the Struggle for the Soul of Labor. Really appreciate your time. Looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, man. You guys are awesome. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
Yep. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, I really love the book. I'm sure you'll enjoy finishing it, Jacob. I highly recommend it, and Hamilton did accomplish what he set out to do in terms of something that's very highly readable. You don't have to be a union nerd like myself and to pick it up and get through it. Lots of great stories inside of it. I really enjoyed learning about Unite Here and their model of success, and got a lot of good ideas about how that could be replicated, I believe, but also, hearing some of the the tougher stories of the losses and defeats that we all experience. I think it's necessary to tell those stories as well. Something that really resonated with me in Hamilton's book is that, labor isn't just another special interest, because labor at its best is the majority interest, right? It's the interest of the vast majority of us who are working class. Labor is most of us. Most of us are not in labor unions, not yet, but the interest of labor at its best is the interest of the working class, which is the vast majority of us. And, I think that is why I agree with Hamilton's analysis and his thesis about how the labor movement is, critical to any sort of theory of change for this country. And, we're dealing with so many crises at this moment. But building people power among working folks and organizing in the workplace, and then using that organizing in the workplace to build power outside of the workplace, in the community, at the ballot box, that is, our pathway to success. I think, it's what I believe is the only way we're going to transform the South. It's the only way I think we're going to be able to make Alabama a better place. Is when folks, particularly folks of different racial backgrounds, gender, other religion, other things that divide us. There's a lot that divides working class people. We are the majority, but we're the most diverse section of society in all those different ways. And so it can be tough sometimes to act like a majority, but we have so much in common. We have common interests and we have common enemies. And so the more we can unite around those common interests, that's where our power lies. And I think labor unions are that tool. They're not the only tool, but I think they are probably the most critical tool. I do believe that labor unions can be working in conjunction with worker co-ops. I think that's a really important part of our strategy as well, growing cooperatives. I think, the electoral and policy side is important as well, building out networks of mutual aid and other forms of just solidarity. That's all important, but organizing unions in the workplace, it's, one of the most important things that any of us can do to grow worker power, and growing worker power is the task ahead of us if we're going to make anything better in this country. Because right now we've got such inequality. I mean, that the Gilded Age robber barons, the bourbon monarchs, they would be blushing at the level of inequality we have today. And the only way we've ever made things better in this country is through struggle, through organized people power, building mass movements of working people that can push and pull and pressure until we make things better. So that's the job ahead of us. So yeah, I really appreciate Hamilton's work, and can't recommend his writing enough. So check out his new book, read his Substack, HamiltonNolan.com. He just put out a great article about liberal institutions. I really enjoyed that one as well. So, shout out to Hamilton. We also want to say it speaks to the need for labor media. We need a whole lot more folks doing what Hamilton's doing. And we need to make sure folks doing what he's doing can, make a living doing it. There are some great labor reporters out there, but there's not enough of them. And those that are out there doing good work are, scraping and struggling to get this stuff published and covered and make a living doing it. So we need robust support for labor media. So as labor unions, as institutions invest in new organizing, which they should be, don't forget to invest in labor media as well, because we've got to be able to reach people, education, outreach, and counter propaganda. It's all part of, what we have to do if we're going to make a difference.
Yeah. The phone number is 844-899-8857, 844-899-TVLR. We're going to have some time. We'd have time for a couple of calls if you want to call in, ask us a question, and participate in the discussion on any of the topics that we have talked about. We've got one more segment prepared, and if we don't get any calls, we might go ahead and wrap early. But that segment is about this that's going on in Mississippi with this welfare scandal. Now, allegedly, Brett Favre and company stole millions of dollars in welfare money from the state of Mississippi, and there's been an update in that story. Adam, what's going on?
So Anna Wolf is the reporter who broke the story, the welfare fraud scandal in Mississippi. She won the Pulitzer Prize for it, and she is now facing possible jail time, which is just, pretty insane to think that the very first person who may face jail time from this entire welfare fraud scandal could be the reporter who actually busted the story open. So it was about a year ago when she won the Pulitzer Prize. She exposed $77 million in federal welfare funds were spent on athletes and various pet projects and cronies. And her editor are now facing jail time, potentially, because they are being sued for defamation by the state's former governor, who was, of course, a top, subject of their reporting. So Anna Wolf, the reporter, and her editor, they've been hit with a court order requiring them to turn over internal files, including the names of confidential sources. Of course, they say the order is a threat to journalism that they will resist. Wolf told NBC News, quote, "If one of us goes to jail, we will be the first person to go to jail in the Mississippi welfare scandal." And she continued, "How can I make promises to sources that I'm going to keep them confidential if this is possible?" So it's really,
What is the case for defamation even over? I mean, is there an allegation that something in her reporting is materially and maliciously false?
So here's the deal. The former governor, Phil Bryant, is claiming he didn't sue them because they exposed $77 million worth of misspending. He applauds them for doing that. The suit is about defamation.
Of who?
Of Bryant, the former governor, implying that he was guilty of any criminal conduct, because he has not been found guilty of anything. He has not been charged with any crimes, and he's alleging that basically the reporting made him out to be a criminal, which he is not technically.
Okay.
So
yes. So my understanding is that, I mean, it seems like this should just be thrown out like as a slap suit, because for public officials, like people just in the public eye, not even elected officials, but just people in the public eye, you have a higher burden of proof to show that you have defamed somebody. Like if somebody were to come out and, I mean, I think even at our level of publicity, we've given up some amount of like the ability to charge people with defamation. But like for example, our wives, they have a much lower bar to clear, right? Because they're not public officials. And so they could say that, you have knowingly said something false about me. But my understanding was that for people who are public, it doesn't just knowingly lying about somebody is not enough. It has to be done with malicious intent, like maliciously lying about it, right?
Yeah,
something like that.
So check this out from NBC News. Quote, "The case has drawn attention beyond Mississippi as an example of how public figures can make life difficult for news organizations long before they have ever presented evidence of the, quote, actual malice needed to prove defamation cases. Mississippi Today, the independent nonprofit organization that employs Wolf and the editor, is asking the state Supreme Court to overturn the order. But, Bryant did appoint 4 of the 9 justices on the state Supreme Court. The editor wrote in the New York Times recently, breaching the confidentiality of sources violates one of the most sacred trusts and breaks one of the most vital tools in investigative journalism. No serious news organization would agree to this demand. It's all over this defamation case from Phil Bryant. He was the governor when the scandal erupted. He has not been charged with a crime. He says he's done nothing illegal, and that the online news organization wrongly accused him of criminal conduct. He declined to be interviewed by NBC News, but he did send his lawyer. So the scandal came to light after Wolf, who was the reporter, she started asking questions about how a state so poor like Mississippi was rejecting more than 90% of the people who applied for welfare. So she just wanted to know, where's this money going if everyone's getting rejected? And that's how she uncovered all sorts of misspending, tens of millions of dollars of misspending. White state officials and some of their cronies and friends and affiliates, they diverted, tens of millions of federal welfare dollars that should have been going for poor families, mostly black women and children in Mississippi. And some well-connected folks. The allegations include a $5 million volleyball facility at the University of Southern Mississippi was built on behalf of Brett Favre, whose daughter happened to be on the volleyball team there at the time. Now, Favre has not been charged with anything, but he allegedly received over $1 million for promotional efforts. And a drug company in which he owned stock received over $2 million, according to public records. Favre lobbied the governor to help secure the money, according to text messages obtained by Mississippi Today. So there was a lot of questions about just how involved Governor Phil Bryant was in some of this. And, again, he claims he's done nothing illegal. And so he is going to sue to try to get these reporters to reveal their sources. And I agree with you, Jacob. I'm not sure why, a judge is doing this. I'm reading here, and I'm still very concerned. I don't know why the judge is going for this, besides the fact that it's Mississippi. And I'm guessing their judges are about as reactionary as most of Alabama's. But yeah, I just wanted to share that story. It's not something we've covered closely. I'm not an expert on, but it just really, that shocked me that potentially the first person involved in this whole scandal to go face jail time could be the reporter, not any of the other people who have been involved or implicated. Again, just the idea that welfare dollars, money that is supposed to go to the poorest people in your state, which also happens to be the poorest state in the country, and you're spending it on volleyball facilities and promotional stuff and giving money to your rich buddies, it's disgusting. So there's a lot there, in terms of the misuse of federal funds and the misuse of federal programs, but also the blatant attacks on the First Amendment.
Right.
So we'll see what happens with this. I definitely want to stay tuned on that story.
Yeah, for sure. We've got a caller on the line. Let's bring them on the air from a 404 area code. Caller from a 404 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm Steve Ronco. I am from Atlanta. I'm the local 600 guy that emailed you about the IA contract.
Yeah, appreciate it. Steve from Atlanta with IATSE Local 600 over there. Talk to us about, you had some thoughts about the contract, the tentative agreement that IATSE has secured. So I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, it's a tentative agreement currently. Next week we have town halls and the ballots go out on July 14th, and then we get to vote on that. The Teamsters are actually still negotiating. The ASA, which is the mixed locals, we're trying to kind of align our contracts more so than before. So a lot of our stuff is being based on SAG, like those rates and kind of things, which is more of an alignment, which is helpful against the AMPTP. This contract, there's not that many concessions compared to others, which, in contracts, a lot of times you hear about losses and not gains, and then the members complain. We did get a 7%, 4%, and 3.5% raises over the term of the contract. We are now getting benefit hours for travel days, which we didn't used to get. Triple time at 15, which some people have accused of them going, oh, now they're expecting a 15-hour day, and that's not what it means. It's to try and curb the long hours. We have a rides and rooms provision, which if you work long days, you can ask production to provide a hotel room or a ride home. That is now mandatory after 14 hours. Pension is getting higher rates now with all these new streaming, now that every like Netflix and Amazon, they're all adding ads, so they've added that residual from those ads to our benefits. So there's a lot of gains in this one. This is one of the first contracts that I've actually am not vehemently saying don't vote on. This is actually a pretty good contract, especially clawing back things that we've lost over the past couple decades.
Right.
So,
in the last contract negotiations, the contract did pass from IATSE. The membership voted in favor of ratification, but there was some amount of controversy. Somehow there was a portion that actually majority voted against it, but because of some provision, the contract was ratified anyway. You can correct any of that's wrong, but I'm curious, based on almost voting it down last time, do you feel like this one will pass or will have any trouble? And obviously with the caveat that you're not going to get to see the full contract language for a little while, and there could be some poison pills that you don't know about right now.
So in 2021, there's multiple bargaining units in the IA for this TV film, and the Hollywood 13, which is 6, 7, and 800, which are the 3 national locals, and then each craft in LA has their own grips, electrics, hair and makeup, costumers. So there's 12 locals, and we all vote on the Hollywood Basic. Then there's the area standards, which are the smaller locals around the country, like 479 that covers Georgia and Alabama, other than Mobile and Savannah, but there's other smaller ones around the country. And their contract is based on the basic, and there's a majors. So we all bargain around the same time. The Hollywood Basic, where the controversy last time in 2021 came in, is we vote on an electoral college system. So we know how that works well in the presidential election. That's what happened in 2021. The popular vote was no, but due to the electoral college system, it passed. And so that's where the controversy came in.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of anticipating, based on what you've been able to see now, that this one will probably pass.
With the 2 strikes last year, and there's a lot of people still not working. I know in Georgia, within 600, it's only about 20% of our members are working.
Oh, wow.
In 479, the report that I heard from them is 16 to 18%. I think, it's still every 3 years it slows down during negotiations because the AMPTP starts to get worried if we go on strike, so they don't want to stop in the middle of the shoot like what happened last year with the WGA and SAG. And being that those strikes were so long, so many people just want to get back to work.
Right.
If this wasn't a good contract, I would still be worried that people would vote yes just to go back to work and say we'll come back in 3 years. But this is basically the moment we have, because in 3 years with AI and the consolidation of the film and TV studios, who knows what the landscape is going to look like.
Right. You mentioned that y'all were trying to align your contracts more, and the way that I understood that comment was that you were trying to align your contracts more with other, IATSE locals and with locals who do, kind of associated work like the Teamsters you were talking about, still negotiating their contract, and but it sounds like you were trying to align your contracts more with those locals. But has there been any talk about trying to align your contracts with the WGA and the SAG-AFTRA and maybe even the DGA? You would hope that the DGA would be amicable to something like that, but I think the DGA is kind of famously like the least, kind of union-oriented union in Hollywood. But it just seems like it just seems to me that the obvious thing would be SAG-AFTRA, WGA, and then all of the I think they're called below the line crew colloquially would want to all be negotiating at the same time.
Yeah, but you're talking so many locals and all across the country, that came out when negotiations started. It's like, why aren't all our contracts aligned? And that's, above my pay grade.
Right.
It would be great. I'm not, when you have constitution and bylaws and leadership and egos and all that, it would take a lot to align those. I think with what's happening now and trying to get pay parity and just things closer to a homogenous across the line, of different locals, it's a start and a step in the right direction. Because so many people want things to happen overnight and they don't. Just like a union contract, people hear when a company signs a card, that's just the beginning of the fight.
Right.
You look at Starbucks and some of these other new unions that even though they've been recognized as unions, they still don't have their first contract. So, things don't move overnight. And part of an issue, especially in the entertainment, after taking a lot of classes during the strikes, is we don't work like typical unions that aren't in the IA. We find out, the way we work is different. So the amount of active members is a lot lower because we bounce from job to job and you may not see people again. So, that's one step of getting the members more organized and active into being political and paying attention and voting on contracts and officer elections.
Right. Well, Steve, appreciate the call, really do, and feel free to call in and keep us up to date on how things are going over there in the IA in Atlanta. Always interested. I think that Adam's an IATSE member, so of course he's interested and self-interestedly in what's going on in IATSE.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, well, the stagehands are a whole other thing, even though we're all in the same union, their contracts are a different time and all that. So maybe I'll check in after we do the contract. The ballots are supposed to be in the 17th, and then, the vote count. So
yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds good, brother. Appreciate it.
And again, you brought up, we haven't even seen the full writing of the 2021 contract because of language and lawyers. So we've basically been working under the MOA since then. So who knows? Yeah.
Wow, that's bonkers. Okay, well.
Yeah. So, but again, I kind of like the way this contract is heading. Let's just see how much work actually comes back overall with the consolidation. But yeah, I will check in after the votes are back.
All right.
That sounds
Appreciate
great.
it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good luck, man.
Yep.
And keep up the good work. I spread when you guys have clips that are, I think, my friends would be interested in. I send it to them. So
awesome.
It.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I really
man.
appreciate that.
All right. Well, look forward to hearing from you again.
Okay. I'll see y'all in a few weeks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, hopefully work will pick back up for folks. And yeah, I mean, it's been pretty positive, like the highlights I've seen, at least coming out of this TA. But, again, not sure what all the final product says, but it's, promising, I would say. It's not like we're hearing tons of talk about concessions and things like that. So that's,
the conversation was definitely a lot different. I mean, for multiple reasons, like he said, but the conversation was a lot different in 2021 during the negotiations. There was a lot of talk online about voting no, and ultimately a lot of people did vote no. But I haven't even seen any criticisms really of this contract go around or any reporting about angst among the membership. So we'll see how the vote goes out. But I don't have anything else. Adam, you ready to roll?
Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot. Appreciate everyone's support. Appreciate everyone who's been liking and sharing and reviewing and leaving us 5 stars, all that good stuff. Yeah, it means a lot. Next week will be a little bit different. You'll be out. So I'll be riding solo, but I've already got a couple interviews lined up, and if you've got good ideas, stories you want us to talk about, send us an email, tweet at us, whatever you need to do. Holler at us, let us know what you want us to talk about. Always down to collaborate.
All right. With that, folks, Adam, we'll see you next week. I'm going to be at the beach. See y'all.